Hello everyone and welcome to Indonesia Unedited, a series of open and honest conversations about Indonesia. And I'm Jane.
And I'm Indra.
And we're lecturers at the University of New England, Australia. Indra, it looks as though Prabowo and his deputy Gibran have won the Indonesian presidential election by a landslide. And so, looking back, Prabowo has a track record. He's run for the presidency twice now and lost. But this time he won. What happened, Indra?
Based on various sources, Prabowo 58% of the total vote so far. And then his competitors are so far left behind. Anies Baswedan got about 25%, and then Ganjar about 16 or 17%. These numbers are quite similar to what has been released by the Indonesian General Election Commission, or KPU, and based on some comments or observations of this election, apparently it's very hard for Anies Baswedan and Ganjar to overtake Prabowo because of the gap. It's really significant. This may be surprising for some people, but not really for those who've been watching this election very closely, especially during the campaign and the political maneuvers that were carried out by each candidate.
What did Prabowo do? How did he win this time, Indra?
There are lots of things that he did to win this election, and of course not only by himself. A number of people are involved in this. I would say, first of all, Prabowo is like a chameleon. He changed his image a number of times throughout the elections, as you can see in the previous elections, where he was seen as a strong man with strong military background. But then he changed his image into someone who looked like General Sudirman, our national hero. He looks very, gagah in Indonesia, riding a horse. And then in the 2019, Prabowo changed his image into an image of our national or revolutionary leader, President Sukarno. And then this time, he changed his image into someone that is very youth-friendly, especially some images that would attract the millennials and Gen Z potential voters.
Okay. What did he do? Did he change his wardrobe? Did he throw out the safari suits?
Yeah, well, in the past, you see Prabowo wearing, those safari suits quite often. But nowadays, if you see him in the news or in his social media posts, he often wear a hoodie, and then also sometimes he dance when there's reporter there. And in one of his social media posts on Instagram, he was seen as checking an art graffiti. So this is something that he never done before. Because of this image, some people even called him as a cute grandpa. He played up this millennial and Gen Z image, and yeah, as I said before, you can see it in his political campaigns that leading up to the election day.
Okay.
And the other thing is that this image has been strengthened by Prabowo's decision to take President Jokowi's son, Gibran Rakabuming, who is 36 years old, to become his deputy. And Gibran is seen as, someone who represents the young people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if we rewind, 10 years ago, he was total rivals with Jokowi, but now Indonesia has moved on, Prabowo's moved on, everyone's moved on, and he's now teamed up with Jokowi's son.
Exactly. So this is related to another image, another new image of Prabowo, that he is now seen by some people as a peaceful person. Because of the past rivalry with President Jokowi, it was really bitter. I still remember on the internet, the the meme wars, between the supporters of Jokowi and Prabowo, and then how Prabowo couldn't accept the final results of the 2019 presidential election and all that. But everything's changed when Jokowi chose him to become the Minister of Defense in his cabinet. So Prabowo now is seen as someone who can reconcile with Jokowi. And then in Japanese, there's this term that what Prabowo did is actually a character of legowo, being legowo or accepting or accommodating. Yeah.
Is that kind of part of traditional leadership characteristics, being legowo?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So this is what has been echoed by observers nowadays. That Pemilu has been over, has over. Now it's time to accept the results with by being peaceful, accommodating, and those were laws supposed to be legowo.
Okay.
But of course, it's not as simple as that.
It seems that the Indonesian public are quite, I guess, accepting or legowo to some extent, because they've moved on from that memory of the angry Prabowo, and they've put their support behind him. His appeal to the millennial voters, does that indicate some kind of recognition of the changes taking place to the voting demographics in Indonesia?
Absolutely. So I think the appeal to the millennials and also the Gen Z generation was one thing that contributed to the results of this election, how Prabowo and Gibran is winning the election. Indonesia's population is changing, and the young generation has been seen as the future of the nation. And it's important to keep in mind that the young voters, the millennials and the Gen Z generation, they are mostly were born and grew up after the New Order. They didn't experience living under authoritarian or military dictatorship under Suharto in the 1990s or 1980s and so on. I was part of the authoritarian generation at the time, and I know very well how hard it was to speak publicly about our country, our government. You are not allowed to talk about the government in a negative way. And I'm not joking that because I was active in the pro-democracy movements in the 1990s, some friends who were vocal or critical of the government, not long after they talk about it, and then they're arrested, basically. There are like intels everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was, 30 years ago at least. And even some of the millennials today, thinking back 10 years ago, they were maybe only 10 years old as well. So
That's
what
right.
do you expect a 10-year-old to remember?
That's right. They don't remember that. And for them, the old image of Prabowo belongs to the past. And now it's different to them. And then for them, what happened in the past, for many of them, what happened in the past is not necessarily a problem anymore.
Yeah, or irrelevant, hey?
Irrelevant to them. So that's why middle class younger generations who contributed 55% of the total votes are taking to this path, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So probably the majority ended up picking Prabowo and Gibran?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this appeal to the millennials, I wonder about the role of neoliberalism, because kind of being a millennial in Indonesia is almost synonymous with neoliberalism. They have this obsession with small business and being independent, forging their own pathway in life. Do you think neoliberalism had an impact on the current political landscape?
Neoliberal ideology plays a significant factor in driving the young voters to choose Prabowo. I mean, most of the younger generation, as discussed by a number of research on youth and economic development, many young generations in Indonesia, they're growing up in the neoliberal environment, and that means they have this neoliberal framework of the definition of success, of a good future that is including such as having their own business, building their own economy, and also being independent. When they started from the small businesses, and they have a dream to expand their businesses across, borders. And if they can be successful overseas, why not expanding overseas? And this is pretty much like the voices of the young people when they started their businesses. They won't stop from the small business, and then they believe that it should grow expansively.
They're very ambitious.
Very ambitious, just like in the image of Gibran.
Oh.
So when Prabowo took Gibran as his deputy, so many young people believe that Gibran is the representations of the successful young generation. Not only that he's known as the city mayor of Surakarta or Solo in Central Java, but before he took that position, he's also known as a young entrepreneur. He had small businesses and all that. So yeah, neoliberal ideology played a significant role.
So that's interesting. You've got that neoliberal entrepreneurial image for Gibran and his appeal to the millennials, and then we've got the cute authoritarian grandpa in Prabowo. So I'd like to ask you about the role of Islam, because every time we talk about politics in Indonesia, that comes up. Someone will say, what about Islam? Okay, so I'm asking you, Indra, what about Islam? What role did it play this time around?
Islam plays a significant factor, but it's not the same like in the past elections. There has been a significant shift in Muslim votes between in the past elections and the current election. So in the past, conservative Muslim votes would fall to or centered around Prabowo, support for Prabowo and Anies Baswedan. Yeah. And you still remember with the huge rally in Monas in Jakarta in support of Anies against Ahok. Yeah. And also Prabowo seemed to be representing the Muslims' interest and all that. So, but then things changed now, especially after Jokowi had made a radical policy against Islamist political forces, where he banned a number of Islamist organizations or movements, such as the Islamic Defenders Front or FBI, and then also the transnational Islamic movements called Hizbut Tahrir Indonesia. So these Islamist movements that were quite significant in the past were pretty much suppressed, and that resulted in how the Islamist voices became underground, and their political supports have become scattered across different factions. So they might be supporting Prabowo, they might be supporting Anies, but it's hard to say that the conservative Muslim would vote for Ganjar, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
It seems that under Jokowi, he made a few changes to the political landscape, by suppressing political Islam, for example. Did he have any other impact?
Yes. Another impact is that what some commentators or observers called as the Jokowi factor. It's a controversial term to some people, but this is quite discussed by many people, actually, the Jokowi factor. So in a way that Prabowo would not be able to win this election if he didn't choose Jokowi's son, Gibran, as the deputy. Gibran is not just a role model for successful youth. Gibran is also believed by Jokowi's loyal supporters as someone who will continue Jokowi's legacy, someone who will continue Jokowi's development programs and all that. So by choosing Prabowo and Gibran for these loyal supporters of Jokowi, actually means supporting Jokowi in a sense. So the difference is that Jokowi is not here in the current election because he's not allowed. He finished his 2 terms. But his son is there. It's pretty much replacing his father, Jokowi. So for these loyal supporters for Jokowi, choosing Prabowo and Gibran means choosing Jokowi.
Okay, so it seems like he has some real loyal supporters. What did Jokowi do to kind of establish this support network?
So he did lots of things, and he's quite genius. So during his presidential terms, he has built a very strong network of political supporters across the archipelago, across state institutions. And this strong network would actually do anything in order to win Jokowi's son. So, for instance, for those people who work in the electoral commissions and then in the police departments and all that, you can find people who are chosen by Jokowi to hold those positions.
Okay. All right. So this is where we get into controversial territory, right?
That's right.
Okay. So I'm going to bring up another controversial topic. It's about Gibran.
Yeah.
So I heard that originally Gibran actually wasn't allowed to run for the vice presidency because of his age. But then something changed and all of a sudden here he is.
Yeah.
Here he is campaigning and here he is now as the possible future vice president.
That's right. There's a controversy about Gibran's candidacy as a deputy for Prabowo in this election, and that is about his age. So he's 36-year-old, and then based on our constitution before, is that someone who want to hold this position should be at least 40 years old. But then this is related to my point earlier, that the head of the Indonesian Constitutional Court is still the relative of Jokowi. If I'm not mistaken, it's Gibran's uncle. And basically this rule that someone who's supposed to be holding the position as a deputy or vice president then can be bypassed. And so.
Okay. Well, to me, I think fair enough. It's okay to remove that age restriction. I think it should be open.
Yeah.
But I can understand where the controversy comes from, given that, it accommodated Gibran and then there's that family connection as well.
That's right.
We've talked about, the alliance between Jokowi, Gibran and Prabowo and how that was playing such a strong role in determining these outcomes. But I think it's important we also acknowledge the other candidates and probably why they didn't win. What about Ganjar? Because to me, it seems he would have been a really strong candidate for the presidency. He's got a political track record as governor of Central Java. He seems like a statesman, and not to mention being handsome. Hi, Ganjar. Sorry. So what happened with Ganjar?
So what happened to Ganjar is a good question. Based on the surveys before August 2022, Ganjar was ranked 1 as the most potential candidate for Indonesian president. So, and then the second was Prabowo, and then the third was Anies Baswedan. But then it changed when there was a rumor, like later on at the end of the August 2022, there's a rumor that Jokowi's son Gibran will partner up with Prabowo. 2 months later, and apparently it's confirmed that Gibran will be the deputy for Prabowo.
Okay.
And then in November 2022, it was the first time that Prabowo and Gibran started the political campaign together, which confirms what were people thinking at the time, that, is it true? Is it true? And apparently that changed the whole game.
Okay.
Yeah. So when Prabowo partnering up with Gibran, and then some votes that were going to Anies and Ganjar now moved to Prabowo because of this Jokowi factor, which is Jokowi's son, Gibran. Right?
Yeah, and that pairing up, there was like this match made in heaven.
That's right. And the problem was that Ganjar did not adapt to that change. He was still using his old strategy in his political campaign, including using Jokowi's, in my opinion, outdated strategy, doing the belusukan, going to villages, meeting people in the traditional markets and all that. And even Ganjar took a step that was a bit too much, in my opinion, by staying overnight in someone's house and all that. I mean, when the game was changed, the challenge has become more difficult in that game. Then he had to change his strategy as well, but he didn't do it. From holding the position as number one last year, now he becomes the third.
Okay.
And Anies Baswedan took over the second position.
Okay. Well, that's, I guess, a lesson in politics, isn't it?
That's
You've
right.
got to adapt. 10 years ago, it was all about populism and pluralism. Those were the buzzwords. But it seems now Indonesian politics has changed quite a bit. It's more authoritarianism mixed with neoliberalism.
Yeah.
And this kind of personality politics, the Jokowi factor.
People say it's Indonesian politics like gado-gado now. It's all mixed.
What do you think, other than Indonesian politics being gado-gado, what do you think of the state of Indonesian democracy today, Indra?
All right. Well, now I will tell you my honest opinion about Indonesian politics. As an academic, as an Indonesian citizen who's been observing Indonesian politics in the past decades, when we talk about Indonesian politics, we talk about Indonesian democracy, especially in relation to the current election. And when people think about democracy, especially in Indonesia, most people would think that it's all about election. It's all about using your rights to vote for someone. It's all about using your rights to, to use your vote in the ballot box and all that. So when people think about democracy, people think about electoral democracy. But most people overlook the other key aspects of democracy. So democracy is not all about choosing someone to be your future leaders and all that, but it is also about, freedom of press, human rights, social justice and welfare, and also to what extent that the democratic government would guarantee or facilitate any attempts to improve the society's problems of inequality, access to work or jobs, and then also how to handle the issues of unemployment, underemployment, and also what else?
What about the C word?
The corruption.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what's the point of we claim to be a democratic country when these issues have been overlooked?
It seems like a bit of an act, really, and shallow in the end.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, that can be a discussion about why some people in Indonesia chose to be golput, not using their right to vote. Golput, golongan putih. Yeah.
Like an informal vote, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah. Some of the elements amongst people who chose to be golput were actually, they're not necessarily political, being political apathy. They actually care about Indonesian democracy. They understand how democracy works. But for these people, they're really critical. For these people, choosing the lesser evils through the elections probably not working, because they've been choosing the lesser evil throughout the elections in the past several years. For them, the results have always been the same. The critical voices continue to be suppressed. People's social mobility pretty much stagnant, not much improved, and inequality is still really problematic. That's the reason why the number of those who chose to not to use their rights to vote are pretty much high in the previous elections and also in the current election.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just a matter of quantity, Indonesia being the third largest democracy in the world.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Yeah. It's also about quality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when people often praised Indonesia as the third largest democracy, I'm like, yes, but you got to also see the quality of democracy itself. To what extent those key elements of democracy, such as freedom of speech, freedom of press, social justice, and all that, can be guaranteed. So, yeah. Well, talking about Indonesian politics, including democracy, it can take days and nights, Jane. So we could probably talk about that next time. And if you're still curious about Indonesian politics, you probably could join us in the discussion chat Q&A. We welcome you at any time you want.